welcome to our week. Hello and welcome to our weekly Alshich share with this commentary on the Parsha of the week. Voyairo this particular week. Normally, as I'm sure you know, we normally start the share with the dedication for a celebration, or perhaps to commemorate somebody who passed away. I would like this week to be a little bit different, a little bit special, and very, very sad. This is the front cover of Hamadiyah from this week. As you can see, it says here, a poor neshama returns, a poor neshama, poor soul returns to Shemaim. It's a 2.5-year-old little girl. She was born, I don't know all the details, but certainly she had brain damage, and there was her parents, she was in a hospital in London, the parents wanted the child not to be disconnected from a life support machine, whereas the policy of the hospital, of the National Health Service, was that in what they see as a hopeless case, or what they saw as a hopeless case, there was no point. Anyway, it became a protracted court battle, and the parents lost consistently, and they were not able to persuade the hospital and the NHS to keep their little girl alive. Of course, from our point of view, from a Jewish point of view, every moment of life counts, and any way we can preserve life, in general, we do. That's not the position of the non-Jewish world, and certainly not the non-Jewish world in the United Kingdom, where I come from. The next tragic stage of the story, was that there was an American politician, somebody called Chuck Schumer, who was Jewish, a senator, and the state of Israel itself said they would like to have the child, bring them here, and we'll look after this child. This again went to a judge, an English judge, who said no. No, it's undoubtedly complicated, and I don't know all the details. They certainly say that they felt the child that was in pain would be in pain if they were taken away, even in transport. I don't know all the details. However, 2 days ago, I think it was, in the hospice where the little girl was on that life support machine, somebody, and I don't know how people do this, came in and switched it off. There was a minion, that's the picture in Hamadiyah, there was a minion of men, I think the little girl's father there as well, dapping as her soul left her body. Anyway, you can probably imagine that many court cases as that generated a huge financial stress. And so there's a fundraising effort going on at this very moment to help raise funds. I think it's £186,000, which would be roughly like $250,000, I'm guessing, $250,000, for the incredible legal bills. However, this is if you can help, is charityextra.com, and it says BDE Baruch Deine Emes Alta, to help our parents and the family, and to show what cholesterol is, I suppose, in such matters. That would be, I'm going to do that shortly, and contribute whatever I can to this tragic story, to help the parents who've been through more than enough. So I wonder if you could join us. So I don't know Alsa's Hebrew name, and didn't have time to quickly look. It was in the newspaper, there's a lot written there. But I'm sure you'll join with me in wishing the parents Arichas Yomim, happy memories to have been the parents of Tzedekah, his soul went back to Shemaim pure, and I hope we'll all be able to help. Okay. Sorry, a little bit sad way to start, but we can not avoid it. Now, the Parsha of Voyairo, more Avraham and Sarah stories, insights into their life. And importantly, there's so much to say here because we've got Sodom and Gomorrah, and in selecting a piece from this, and I looked at last year's Alshich, and this is a bit of a cheat. I hope my sponsor will forgive me, but I don't think I actually produced an Alshich share in Voyairo last year, which is, I don't know how I did that, but there's certainly some I missed because of obviously getting a weekly share during the course of a year, things happen. So I had lots to pick and lots to choose from this week's Parsha, and I chose the very interesting and frankly perplexing incident when Avraham moves to the south, after the destruction of Sodom, Avraham moves to the south, to a place near Gerar, where he bumps into the king of Gerar, somebody called Avimelech. And at that point, Sarah is taken by another king. She's already been kidnapped by Pharaoh, you remember, last week's Parsha. And, well, I think I'll let the Chumash tell the story. I'm not going to share the screen with you. I'm going to read with you. I have my little art scroll, as I normally do. And we shall may perhaps read the story, and then we'll look at what the Alshich has to say. And this week, I would also like to recruit Rabbi Dessler, who says something very critical, I think, to understanding this whole incident. And I have to tell you, I suppose I better let the cat out of the bag. In preparing this share, which I did up until just a few moments ago, I was for the first time stuck as to what the Alshich meant. I was going to say stuck what the Alshich meant. I'm often stuck what the Alshich means because it's extremely brilliant, and I'm not. But it was what he said when I did understand it that frankly didn't make any sense to me. And just a few minutes ago when preparing the share, it did make sense to me. Or at least I had an idea, which I'm obviously going to share with you. And I'll be very happy to, if you want to get in touch by email, yy@rabbiyyy.com, which of course is the address, yy@rabbiyyy.com, if you want to have a sponsorship, to secure a sponsorship of the share. All right, let's see what it says. So let's get into the Parsha. But Yisra Misham, now this is of course Parshas Voyairo, it's chapter Kof. And if you've got the art scroll, it's page 90 to make life extraordinarily easy. But Yisra Misham Avraham Artza Negev, and Avram goes down to the land of Negev. But Yeshuv bin Kodesh bin Shur, and he lives between the place called Kodesh and a place called Shur. But Yogor Begror, and he settles, or Yogor, temporarily stays in a place called Gror. But Yoma Avram el Sarah Ishtoy, and Avram says about or to regarding Sarah, his wife, she's my sister. Now, of course, from last week's Parsha, that rings a very loud bell. That's exactly what he said when Avram said, I know you're an incredibly beautiful woman. When we go to Egypt, which is a place which is absolutely sunk, submerged in moral and sexual bankruptcy. And Sarah was one of the most beautiful women in human history. Then if Pharaoh sees you, if the people see you there, they'll kill me and take you. So pretend you're my sister. And of course, she is taken by Pharaoh, despite that, or along with that, to become a new bride to add to his harem. And we all know the story there. Hashem gives them all sorts of terrible diseases, and etc., etc. So that's the background. But yet, despite that fact, which the Ramban is critical of, saying that Avram, that tactic that Avram adopted, which consequently, and he argues, almost inevitably put Sarah in danger, was a mistake. He claims that Avram made a mistake there, and that's really controversial. But if that's a bit sort of head-scratching, the fact he repeats it now is doubly head-scratching. How could that possibly happen? So let's read on and see if we can delve into this and see what the Alshich has to say. V'yisem shom Avram artza hanegam, v'yeshuv bin kodesh bin shur v'yigor b'gror, and he stays in Gror. But Yom Avraham and Sarah Ishtai, Avram says to his wife Sarah, she's my wife, v'yishlach Avimelech melech Gror, and the king, Avimelech, the king of Gror, sends for her, but Yikach Sarah, he takes Sarah. Exact same story, a complete repeat, to be a wife. V'yava Elokim el Avimelech, and Hashem, and it's the Midas Adin, Elokim, comes to Avimelech, b'cholam halayla, a dream at nighttime. V'yomer lo, he says to him, Meis ala isha shalakachta. You're going to die for the woman you've taken. But he bulas Baal, she is a married woman. But Avimelech lo krav aleha. So Avimelech obviously had a brain inside his skull, and he didn't go anywhere near her. V'yomer, and he says, Hashem, Midas Arachamim, Midas Adin threatens him. So he appeals to Midas Arachamim, the merciful side of God's nature. Agoy gam tzadik tarag, will you kill a righteous people? Allahu Omerli, didn't he say Achoisihi? Mehi gam he, and she also said, sorry, I didn't translate it, I don't think I'll do that again. Allahu Omerli, didn't he say to me, Achoisihi, she is my sister? Mehi gam he, and she also said, Omra, Ochihu, he's my brother. The Psalm Levov with a a perfect or pure heart. How do they translate that? Quickly leap over to see how the Rabbi Alshich translates that. Can't find it. It's got to be somewhere. And she too, oh, they've missed out the number. It is not my fault. Oh, there it is. Did not he himself say, she is my sister? And he too, and she too herself said, he's my brother. In the innocence of my heart. Innocence, purity, I would say. And the integrity of my hands have I done this. And Hashem turns around and says, no, that's not what happened at all. There's a different version to this. You knew what you were doing. That's the basic part of the story. Now, when Avimelech confronts Abraham with what he's done, then Avimelech says, I'll just read it to you in English because we're not going to analyze that bit. That's when we go swap over to Rabbi Dessa's perceptions of or understanding of the posuk and the story. But in verse 11, it says, and Abram said, and he's, 1 4, verse 10, then Abimelech summons Abram and says to him, what have you done to us? How have I sinned against you that you brought upon me and my kingdom such a great sin? Deeds that ought not to be done, you've done to me, by pretending that she is your sister and I took her in innocence, and etc. And Abimelech said to Avram, what did you see that you did such a thing? How could you do such a thing to me? Now listen to the response of Avram Avinu. And Avram said, because I said to myself, there is no fear of God in this place, and they'll kill me because of my wife. Very important. Because there's no fear of God, they'll kill me. A place without fear of God is a place which inevitably will justify any moral violation. It's something which one of my great rebbes, I was thinking before in preparing our share, how many teachers do I have over my absolutely greatest rebbes? Because I've got so many, very many. I'm looking at 3 in the wall. My Rosh Rebbe Gurovitz, my Rav, Rabbi Rakov, my old Rebbe, my first Rebbe, Rabbi on the Balkan, Rabbi Miller of Gateshead Seminary, another great, Ramatasil Solomon, and this Rabbi here, Rabalta Halpin. Rabalta Halpin, who incidentally, I think, at least from my tiny mind, was the greatest mind I ever met, certainly the most curious mind I ever met. And he once said to me, he was a German Jew, escaped Hitler, and he said to me exactly this point, no matter how sophisticated the society, if there's no fear of God, exactly as Avraham said, no matter how great is their art, their culture, their philosophy, and how they see themselves, but without fear of God, the society is inevitably going to soon pervert, corrupt, be able to twist and justify any perversion of truth or any perversion of anything. That's the basic story. Now, I think we will leap straight into the Alshich, saying I've been riled up there. I'll put my little art scroll down here and we turn the Alshich as usual. And let's see what he says. He's got some questions to consider, which I'm sure from my regulars will come as no surprise whatsoever. So let's see exactly what the questions are. And again, this is because this is the second year of the second cycle of the Alshich year. I was able to dip into parts of the Alshich that I've only just brushed before, and now I was able to look at more detail. But let's see what he has to say. So the pasuk says, "V'yama Avraham el Sarah ishtoi achoisihi v'yishlach Abimelech melech Gerar Sarah," and Avram said that she was his wife. She was his wife was his sister, and Abimelech took her, as we read. And he says, question number 1. Isn't this weird? Isn't this bizarre? Loimer achoisihi, the Avram says that she's my sister. And it doesn't seem to occur to Avram that he's simply repeating history. And if you repeat history, history will repeat itself. And inevitably, the consequences, the cause and effect that produced Sarah being kidnapped by the king of Egypt and nearly raped and violated, then the exact same thing is going to happen now. How could he not know that? How could he not be aware of that? And that's the one that I was really struggling with before. And an answer, I think a sufficient answer, you'll undoubtedly email to let me know, came to me just before it was time to make this recording. But let me read more of the Alshich. And and stop talking, which is probably a very good thing. How could he ever think to say once again, she's my sister below Chosh, without it ever entering his mind, apparently? The same thing, the history will repeat itself and she will be taken again. And for it not to happen, and of course it doesn't happen, she's not taken, is a miracle, the same repeating miracle as before. Hashem sends along nasty diseases that stops Pharaoh going anywhere near her. Hashem sends along nasty diseases to Avimelech and his household to stop anybody going near her. So, but that's to rely on a miracle, which is a very big no-no in Jewish thought. Never be somach hanes, never rely on a miracle. If you do, the likelihood is, even if you get the miracle, you've used up all the deposits in your heavenly bank account, which will leave you bankrupt. How could you rely on a miracle? So that's question number one, and that's a biggie. Number two, but Mamre Avimelech, when Avimelech says, Hagoy Gam Tzadik, will you also kill Hagoy Gam Tzadik? A goy, a nation, also tzaddik. Should be a nation also tzaddikim, also saintly. Well, it's this very strange language here. I should have said, Agam tzaddik, will you kill also tzaddik? Which I suppose is me, so Avimelech is saying. Targi will kill. Man dech shmeid, a goy, how can he, if that's true, that he's making himself representing the whole nation? What's this word gam there? Now, there are lots and lots of questions here, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So you're getting off very light this week, just 2 questions. I hope those are clear. But so the question number 1, let's just repeat it. Question number 1, how on earth could Avram decide to instigate or put into effect a plan which failed so miserably before, when the exact same circumstances? In fact, somebody say it's become a common phrase, the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. That was the first thing. And this strange question about a goy gam tzaddik, will you kill a righteous nation? The Hebrew's wrong. So let's see what the Alshich has to say. He tackles the first one first, which allows me to hopefully share my little light bulb moment I had a short time ago, and hopefully that'll be one that will please you. So he says, Avram neged Enob asher korlan es loipar. Now Avram, when it being clear in front of his face, in front of his eyes, exactly what happened when the king of Egypt took his wife, then lo omer lo ata omer achasi at. He doesn't say no what he said before, because before he said to her, pretend you're my sister, say you're my sister. And she went along with it. Knowing what the results were, he doesn't say that now. So it's not that he's blind to what happened before. Apparently, he's acutely aware of what happened before. And accordingly, he changes what he says now. I said before, if you repeat history, history repeats itself. But he doesn't repeat history. Because before he asked Sarah, or Sarai she was, he asked Sarah to tell people I'm his sister. He doesn't say that. He says she's my sister, but she doesn't. So there's already a change. There's already a difference in the strategy, which might not be at first apparent. But I've got something else to suggest as well. Oh, this is the Alshich, so he says I've got a mere suggestion. And particularly because Avraham is acutely aware of the incredible pain that it caused his wife when she was nearly taken by this non-Jewish king as a wife, that caused a tremendous distress. Okay. But he did say she's my sister. That's why it says Avram says but he didn't ask her. The Pasuk doesn't report, as it does in the case of the incident with Pharaoh, that he asked her to say the same thing. He doesn't ask her. However, she does say to people, she volunteers to tell people, so herself volunteers to tell people that we're brother and sister, but not with the insistence and not even with the suggestion or hint from Avraham that she should do so. Now, why? They are both extremely brilliant people, and this would seem to be a very foolish move. Okay, so if Avram, we can't blame Avram, we can't say Avram forced her, he didn't. But still, she is willing to put herself now in the same position, which makes it even more puzzling, I suppose. Like a mistake from both. Why is he confident that the plan will work again? But he won't include his wife on it, but she volunteers anyway. So now we really do have history repeating itself. So now we're back to where we started. So let's see what the Alshich has to say. I'll read it to you the way I read it at first and see if the same problem occurs to you as it occurred to me. So another few lines of the Alshich. And he says again, it was the fact that Sarah, without any provocation, without any suggestion from Avraham, said to people who asked her, no, we're brother and sister. But come on, no sight. Now, Avram's intention, Avram's plan in this one was not a repeat of history. Although that's starting to get into my solution here. But anyway, I'll just read the Alshich. So if it's the case that I say that she is my sister, then anybody who is interested in marrying her, they will use the exact same technique that we always use. You go to the family. And well, in those days, you go to the family and you ask, can I marry? And I'm the family. And then he says, I will be able to have a couple of days of being able to discuss this with them, and they find any excuse under the sun why they can't marry her. So it's not a problem. They'll come and ask me. I'll be able to, push them off for a couple of days or generate all sorts of excuses. She's already married to a fellow who's overseas at the moment. He's away in business, but he'll be back soon. That sort of answer. I think, however, if I remember rightly, it's either Lekach Sichos Musa or Yitzhak Sher or the Altar of Slobodka in the Sefer Ortzof and said more than that. As Avraham Avinu's gift was in his mouth, the thousands, tens of thousands of non-Jewish people, kings and queens, by the way, Sarah did the queens, Avraham did the kings, converted them, persuaded them to the truth. He had a golden tongue. He was able to, as long as he's able to speak, and therefore by saying that the brother and sister, then they'll come and negotiate, and then he'll be able to, as it were, catch them. There's a famous story about this, which I think is illustrative of this. The story about Onkelos Hager. In every Chumash, before there was Rashi, who appears in every Chumash, which is worthwhile, then there is the commentary of Onkelos. And Onkelos was the nephew of the Emperor Hadrian. And the Emperor Hadrian started off as being quite pro-Jewish, then became a rabid anti-Semite when he fell under the influence of the Greeks, who were our great enemies at the time, philosophical, theological enemies at the time. And he became a great, great anti-Semite. And rather embarrassing for him, his nephew, that is Onkelos, you can rather tell that he's a Roman from his Roman origins from the us at the end of the name, Augustus, Romulus, Remus, and so on and so forth. And they seem to have a big thing for us's in names. Anyway, Onkelos goes and converts to Judaism, living in the land of Israel. This does not please the Romans very much at all. Certainly doesn't please his uncle, who happens to be the Caesar of Rome. So he sends along instructions for a cohort of, under a centurion, a cohort of Roman soldiers to go and collect him, stick him in a boat and send them back to Rome. But when they come, he speaks to them, Uncle speaks to them, and they convert to Judaism as well. When this happens, they send along another cohort and he converts them as well. Now, the Caesar of Rome is not used to being getting his way, so he sends instructions, another group of soldiers under another centurion with strict instructions. He mustn't open his mouth. If he does, he kill him. And so they burst into the room where he's sitting learning Torah, and swords are drawn, and the centurion announces, say one word, and it's off with your head. You're coming back to Rome. And he schleps him to the door. And Uncle says, okay, but do you mind if I just kiss the mezuzah? To which the centurion says, what's a mezuzah? And they converted as well. Now, of course, that's just headlines, but it's illustrative of the point that somebody who has got the gift of the gab, as they say, would be able to utilize that verbal dexterity and ability and persuasiveness in order to make a difference and change. So Avram only has to get them, make sure they doesn't kill him straight away. So he's able to speak, and then he can, as it were, manipulate events. However, says the Alshich, he says, come to him 1 day or 2 days to petition for the sister, come up with some sort of excuse. Somebody's, she's married, somebody else. However, as Abimelech just happened to be the king, as the Pasuk says, she was taken straight away. There were no negotiations. If I want to marry your daughter, you want to marry my son or my daughter, then we come and discuss things. But the kings don't need to make negotiations. Kings are, I'm just taking that girl. You should be so honored that I'm taking her, and that's what happens. So that's what was going on here. But how does that help us? And that's all the Alshich says in this. So I was scratching my head. I just didn't understand this because, well, that's not answering the question at all. Because Pharaoh was a king, and Pharaoh didn't have to come and negotiate with him. And look what happened there. So again, it's we're going around in circles here. So therefore, why would you repeat a process which is likely the most beautiful, or the second or third most beautiful woman in history, likely to have the same effect on another king? And just like one king will not ask for, your permission, you're honored. I would even consider marrying your sister. So the second king will do the exact same thing. So why is that an answer? But bearing in mind that the Alshich is so much cleverer than me, I don't think it's too hard to imagine the following. He thinks that history is not going to repeat itself because there's a different king and a different kind of king. Pharaoh is a disgusting person. Egypt is sunk. Egypt is the quintessential example of a sexually corrupt society. It's a mokum tuma, as Chazal say. Egypt, of all places, was uniquely gifted, uniquely geographically situated in order to produce an extremely debauched society. So the sort of behavior that he anticipated and which provoked him to the strategy of brother and sister, it was a surprise that the king got it. That failed. But he can use it again with a different king who is not as debauched, because you see, he's the guy who thinks he's a tzaddik. He's a guy who thinks, what's the phrase in English? God is my right. What's that? God in mon droit. What is it? I can't remember what God is. Gosh, in Latin. What's the motto of England? Dieu est mon droit. It's the coat of arms of Her Majesty the Queen, and I think of the British state, if I remember rightly. Dieu est mon droit. God is on my side. God is on my right. That's a different. If that's how you set up your stall, that I'm a moral good person, then you can expect at least some degree of loyalty to that status, or to that claim, or to that ambition. And that, in that case, he doesn't anticipate that the same thing is going to happen again. Different king. That strategy, it didn't work with one sort of king, might well work with one king who claims nobility and morality, etc., etc. Although, I think we all know, even today, in royal households, I'm afraid morals and sexual morals tend not to go too hand in hand. That's, I think, what an answer would help us. Well, let's go a little bit further. And he says, no, when he does what he does in taking this woman, Voyairo Elohim comes to him and says, Voyairo he's going to die. But listen to this. Lavo el inyan nosiv leva el maimer sleifa inyan. To understand what's really going on here, what does God say at the end of it? He says, you're going to die for the woman you took. But at the end of it says that Avram davens for all, I should really read this to you. Avram davens for all of Abimelech's household. And as a consequence of that, the thing is removed. Here it is, here it's possibly down. But Yispalo Avram el Elohim, Avram davens to God. But Yarpe Elohim es Abimelech. And Abimelech cures him and his household from the terrible disease he sent, which had stopped up all the body orifices of Avimelech and his people, but Moshe, Yeldu, and now they're able to breathe, to go to the toilet, I suppose, and also to have children. Ki Otzer Hashem ba'ad kol rechem l'beis Avimelech al devar Sarah ishes Avram, because Hashem had stopped up the orifices al devar because of the matter of Sarah, the wife of Avram. But the Alshich says something which is very interesting, which is, it's interesting to note that Avimelech says, will you kill a righteous people? We're righteous. Will you kill the righteous people? He said that she was his sister. Vehi gamhi, and she also said, he's my brother. Notice the difference. When Avimelech is telling God in this prophetic interchange between the two in this dream, he said that she's my sister, which is true. But then he's tricky. He's a tricky one, this one, the guy who thinks he's so noble and so such a tzaddik. He says, and she also said that he's my brother. But he doesn't say, and she also said to me. No, she didn't. When she was taken into his house, then she said, I'm a married woman. And he ignored it because he wanted to marry her. The truth he ignored, he was able, and he said, oh, hold on, you told other people you're brother and sister. We'll just go with that version. That's a nice version, as it gets me to exactly where I want to be. You, your husband, and you as my wife. That will do me, that version will do me very nicely. And that's why this is confirmed by what it says at the end. Because God had stopped up all the bodily orifices, Yud Zion. I'll read this to you again. Kol Recha, the base of Abimelech, Al Devar Sarai, Ishes of Avram. Not Al Devar because of the matter of Sarah, the wife of Avram, which we already know. Al Devar Sarah. What was the word? Devar also means word. What did she say to him? I'm Avram's wife. Not such a great guy. But he likes to assume that he's a great guy. He likes to pretend to be a great guy. Let's read a little bit more of the Alshich, and I'll take you to Rabbi Desta. So he says, so he said to other people, the truth was that Avram had said, Sarah had said to other people that he and she were brother and sister, but not to him. But and now we can understand. Avram, of course, therefore, when God says you're going to die if you touch her, didn't go anywhere near her. He didn't even touch her. And as it was the case that everybody else in the household were also struck by this horrible disease or this horrible condition. Why? Why were they struck by that horrible condition? What did they do wrong? They didn't protest. When this woman is shouting, I'm a married woman, I'm married to Avram, they should have protested, and they didn't. They also got struck with this. Omar Hagoy, then he says, Hagoy Gam Sadik, will you also kill these people? And then the Alshich comes in and says something which is very interesting. So let me read to you. And again, you get a sense of the arrogance and narcissism of this king. Listen, he says the following thing. He says, Avimelech in his defense says, look, there are 4 people who are complicit in this. The primary cause of the whole problem is Avram. Did he not say that I am her brother? Well, he did say that. So that everything that flows, all the mistakes, anything that you're upset about, Hashem, you know where to go, to the man who said that we're brother and sister. So point number 1, Avram's the problem, or he's the prime cause of the problems. 2, he. The truth is that she did say to other people, okay, she might not have said it really, she said to other people. So of course, I believe that to be the case. Before I took her, she was telling people that they're brother and sister. She was also saying it. Gimel, Hamon called my ear and called Bnei Besa Shalom. And if we're going to argue that the people in my household didn't protest my behavior, well, of course they didn't. I'll kill them. And the 4th, kings often don't accept criticism well. 4, and then of course the other one is me. I did something wrong. Okay, I took her. However, I say that I did in innocence. Then he says, Omer Avimelech, Ani ainli Oshim Klal. So with regards to me, let's work through these things. I'm not at all guilty, not in the slightest. And again, this gives you an insight into, as I said, his narcissism. If despite my sincerity and my innocence, are you still going to say that I was ultimately to blame or played the part of which is deserving to be accused of guilt? And you want to say that she said she was brother, she was his brother and sister. She claimed that Avram was her brother only out of fear of me. So if I am to some degree, even though he's being noble, okay, if somebody's got to take the fall, I'll take the fall. But what about my poor people? If people who did not, my people in my household, did not complain, did not cry out, again. Well, Avraham himself surely has to, if they are guilty for just not speaking out, surely Avraham is guilty for speaking out, which led to the whole affair. He's the prime cause of the whole thing. When you say I'm going to die, if when he says Hagoy Gam Tzadik Tarik, if you're going to kill the Goy, my people, Gam Tzadik Tarik, the Tzadik Avram, you've also got to kill. If my people are going to be killed because they didn't, because their silence, their acquiescence at my behavior, if I'm guilty, what about Avram? Hagoy Gam Tzadik, then you've got to kill him as well. It's a very. I had to discipline a young man in in one of the classes I give in one of the yeshivas in New York, and I took him and I tried to reason with him to see that he'd done something wrong. The principal having just tried to get through to him as well. He could not see it. Everybody else was doing it as well. Did you do it? Yeah, but everybody else was doing it as well. Yeah, but you were the loudest. No, he just wasn't listening. And when you get a mindset like that, that's a little bit problematic. Here, and we're running out of time, but the Alshich goes on to show that how Hashem demolishes his argument. And as I say, the argument's just been demolished by the fact that at the end of it, God takes away, answering Avram's prayer, the terrible diseases that was caused because of Devar Sarah. The word of Sarah is a married woman. So he did know. So the whole thing is just a ruse. The whole thing is just a pretense of nobility. But let's go back to this point that I told you from my old Rebbe Ravalta Halpern, when he said it's entirely to do with the fact, Avram says, that you didn't fear God. That's why I said, why did I deceive you? I had no choice. If you're not God-fearing, you'll do anything. You'll cover it, but you'll do anything. So in Mixed Emilio, and interesting to note that Ravalta Halpern, like I said, along with Arya Carmel, who I discussed of meeting a few times, they were the ones who gathered the writings of Rabbi Dessler for the first volume of Mixed Emilio. Ravalta didn't, I don't think, was involved in the editing of the rest of Mixed Emilio, but certainly he was critical in the first volume, which most people, I think, still believes to be the best of the 6 volumes. But anyway, the 5 volumes. But anyway, let me read to you what he says on page 33. This is very interesting. And he says, it's his famous Kuntras HaChesed, Rabbi Dessler on Chesed. It's got a subtitle, which is called Hanoisen Banotil, The Givers and Takers. And anybody who's ever studied in Gateshead, or in Polish as the Talmud of Gateshead, of Rabbi Dessler, will know this essay off by heart, just saying those words, givers and takers, usually for Talmidim of Rabbi Dessler, just they'll go, yes, we know where we're going. So he says, Kasher bara Elokim es Adam, when God created Adam, he made us to be either givers or takers. We're philanthropic, or we're altruistic, or we're selfish and we're takers. The facility of giving, to be philanthropic, that is the very holiest, the very highest of character traits. And it's one of the character traits of God himself, who gave it the whole universe, the whole world. He's a giver. We believe Kabul without getting anything back in reward, and because he doesn't need anything back in reward. So that's the introduction, he says. Best that we can do is, of course, give him our thanks and our recognition that came through us, but that's for our benefit, not for his. But when it comes to being selfish, who asher yisava adam limshach elov is called habal b'teva. So that's when a person wants to take everything to come out, say anything that comes into his frog in the throat there, anything he could possibly grab from himself, he will take. Who asher Ukraine b'ni adam ahabas. That's what people call selfishness. Who shorish kolras, which is the source of all evil human behavior, all evil human attitudes. Rabbi Dessa carries on. There are some people who take and give nothing back. He and Nikra they call that a gazlan, gan of a gazlan. And if it's different, a gan is a thief, a gazlan is somebody who mugs people to steal the stuff. Yeah, or ganov in Mibli does, or if he ganov somebody who sneaks, a sneak thief, that sort of thing, or pickpocket. Or Ramai, or perhaps he's a fraud. Because you ganov das when he cheats and steals people. A cloning, but that's individuals. But in the bigger picture, oisim ulchamas, people who are interested, if that's their mindset, these are the people who launch wars to take other people's stuff. Sorry. Sorry, darling, I'm just recording a shear, can't talk. Sorry, that was my wife. Bit of excitement in the shear. Anyway, so basically, oisim ulchamas, roisim amin, but Adam, they go to war. They do warfare. And the fact the word for war in Hebrew is milchama. You take lechem, the very basic thing that society needs. You'll steal their food as well. So many wars have been taken because of famine and getting other people's. Pratim Hashem yichidim yigzadlo. And then when it comes to individuals, then as we said before, these are people who steal and cheat. And this is where we get to a very interesting Rabbi Desta. When we're talking about Yechidim, the individual we talked about before, the cheats, the swindlers, the crooks, etc. That's why societies set up courts and police forces to deal with such people, to protect people from such evil elements. And also they force people, because of fear of the government, they force, and the consequences, they force them to behave in a good way. Stop them behaving badly. However, the root cause, the basic nature of people remains unchanged, even at the scale of the consequences, and that polices their behavior. But it doesn't actually make them want to be good people. It's just the scale of the consequences. So that the basic dynamic, the basic part of their nature, which is their thieves, natila, it remains in place. Never, says Rabbi Dessler, never trust anybody, or believe in their civilization, no matter how sophisticated, how cultured. Think of Germany. Because just underneath the surface, there's anarchy and terrible behavior just waiting to percolate. And as soon as the police seem to be vulnerable, defund the police, that's out of insanity. Or when there's a riot and the police are overwhelmed, we know what human nature, the raw animalistic part of human nature comes roaring through it. They will steal, they will kill. In Kibar Gila Chazal is the term of the Soid, the Omram and the rabbis make this very, very clear. Ilimora Morishel Malchus would it not be for the sphere of the government, Ish Esrael Chaim Beloy, each person would swallow his neighbor whole. And one of my other great teachers, somebody called Rav Zev Cohen of Gates and Yeshiva, once pointed out, it says it would swallow them whole. It wouldn't even stop to chew. So what seems to be a great guy or somebody who is a sophisticate. No, I'm not Pharaoh. No, you're not Pharaoh because Pharaoh was crude and obvious. But you do the exact same thing. It's just that you're more sophisticated and you hide that basic taking nature. And of course, Hashem dismisses his claim. But ultimately, the guilt of Avram in this is, I think, certainly mitigated enormously by simply pointing out it was a different king who claimed to behave differently. He could therefore maybe use a tactic which didn't work with one king, with the second one, expecting second results, which didn't actually quite manifest themselves. Good. I shall look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you all for joining me.